and start recording. Okay, welcome everyone. It's March 3rd, 4:30 p.m. President Ryan, we may begin.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Choi. I'd like to call the meeting to order. If you are joining us, you would have gone on to our SMUSD.us/media website to join. All meetings of the Board of Education are open to members of the public unless publicly notice as a confidential closed session as allowed by the law, Education Code 35147. Members of the public may address the board as outlined in the public comment section of the agenda. The audio for all of these meetings is recorded, and a member of the public may be held liable for any slanderous or otherwise defamatory statements in consideration of the board and members of the audience. Please turn off or silence your cell phones while in this session. The San Marino Unified School District encourages those with disabilities to participate fully in the public meeting process. If you need a disability-related modification or accommodation, including auxiliary aids or services to participate in the public meeting, please contact the assistant to the superintendent, Jennifer Deloti at SMUSD.us. And the phone number is 626-299-7000, extension 1310, at least 48 hours prior to the scheduled board meeting so that we may make every reasonable effort to accommodate you. Under Government Code Section 54953.2, the Americans with Disability Act of 1990, 12132. Documents provided to the Board of Education regarding an open session item on this agenda will be made available for public inspection on the district office located at 1665 West San Marino or on our website at our district during business hours or on our website. In addition, writings, documents will be viewed on the district's website at www.smusd.us. And we will begin open session now. This is a procedural item. I'd like to call everyone to order, but do a roll call, please. Mr. Chang. You're muted.
Yes.
Mrs. Chong.
Hello.
Mrs. Chan Lin.
Here.
Mr. Barbary.
Here.
Mrs. Ryan, present. And Miss Guillermo.
Here.
Hi, Vahini. All right. So this is our open session call to order, and now Pledge of Allegiance. Would you please put the flag up and then everyone stand? Join me. All right, 1, 2, 3. You want to lead, Dr. Choi?
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. All right, next we have approval of the agenda. This is an action item.
I'd actually like to make a motion because I think we have communication from the audience regarding matters not on the agenda as an item here at 5A. Since this is a special meeting of the board, any comments would just need to be on the topics that we're discussing tonight, not just open. So just a procedural thing, we shouldn't be taking comments that are not on this particular agenda.
Correct. Thank you, Mr. Barbary, for that reminder. And Dr. Choi will be kind of in charge of that.
So, but I think we need to amend the agenda. So I will make a motion to remove item 5A from the agenda.
Okay.
Second, Jane.
All right, so Mr. Barbary has made the motion and second by Mrs. Chong. I will do roll call. Mr. Chang?
Aye. Here.
Okay. Mrs. Chong?
Aye.
Mr. Barbary?
Aye.
Mrs. Chan Lin?
Aye.
Mrs. Ryan? Aye. And then student board member?
Aye.
All right, so item 5A, communication from the audience regarding matters not on the agenda has now been removed from the agenda item. So now may I have an approval of the agenda?
This is Jane. I move to approve the agenda with that amendment.
Thank you.
Second.
Mrs. Chong? I will second that motion. All right, roll call. Mr. Chang?
Aye.
Mrs. Chan Lin?
Aye.
Mr. Barbary?
Aye.
Mrs. Chong?
Aye.
Mrs. Ryan? Aye. And student board member Vahini?
Aye.
Thank you so much. The motion has passed. The agenda has been approved. Public comment. The Board of Education has adopted board policy 9323B to ensure that the public's right to be heard in any matters pertaining to the San Marino Unified School District. Persons who wish to provide public comment will have two options. First, you may submit through an online form. Second, you can request to speak during the meeting via question and answer and through phone dial-in. When you're submitting an online form, the public has submitted public comments for the open session. It was called for today, March 3rd, from 11 to 3:30. Comments received during this time will not be read during the meeting, but will be provided to the board. At this time, were there any public submissions for comment?
We have none that were submitted through the online form.
All right. So now we move on to public comments through question and answer during the meeting. There are opportunities for the public to comment, and they're offered at the start of the regular open session for items not on the agenda prior to the study session. The Board of Education reserves the right to hold a public comment period prior to any individual item on the agenda. 5 minutes may be allotted to each speaker, maximum of 20 minutes to each subject matter. And then at this point, because there's only one item, do we need to continue with this structure? Just allowing 20 minutes? Or is that my discretion?
That's at the discretion of the Board of Education.
At the board. All right, thank you so much for that clarification. However, in the event that there are more than 4 speakers on the same subject matter, the board president retains the discretion to adjust and to limit the time allocated to each speaker to ensure that all wishing to speak will be heard within the 20-minute or discuss allotment. During public comment, the meeting will pause for 1 minute to take requests to speak. Raise your hand function is used to take requests during the public comment period. For online attendees, press the raise your hand icon to add yourself to the queue. And for phone attendees, dial *9. The speaking order will be determined based on the order of requests received. Individual speakers will be unmuted and then called upon to speak. Communication now from the audience regarding matters on the agenda.
Thank you, President Ryan. We'll pause for 1 minute to take requests to speak on the discussion agenda item. So if you'd like to make a request to speak, please press the raise hand icon or dial *9 if you are joining us by phone. Again, if you would like to make a request to speak under public comments for the discussion agenda item, please press the raise hand icon or dial *9 if you are joining us by phone. Okay, President Ryan, we have one request to speak from Mr. Mike Kalaki.
All right.
Mr. Kalaki, your line is now open.
Much. I did bring up this issue in a prior meeting a couple meetings ago, that the format of the school board meetings does not make
I'm
much.
sorry, is this related to the agenda specifically that we were discussing tonight?
It is, Ms. Chung. Thank you very much. What I'm trying to explain is that the public is being asked to make comments right now on something that we have absolutely no idea what is going to be presented at the meeting. We're asked to speak about an item on the agenda, and after the community speaks, we are then going to receive a presentation with details. So you're putting the cart before the horse, and quite frankly, I believe you're denying the community the opportunity to actually provide public comment. So I would ask that both today, as well as in every future meeting that the school board has, they rearrange the agenda format so that public comments can be made after presentations are made on a specific item on the agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay, and that concludes the request for public comment at this time.
Thank you, Dr. Choi. So next up, I just want to remind everyone that this is a study session. It's regarding the reduction of particular kinds of services for certificated staff. This is a discussion item only, and it's being provided to us by the executive team and principals. The discussion item is meant in order to provide an opportunity for the Board of Education to understand the complexities of developing a list to reduce particular kinds of certificated services. The staff will make a presentation to the board, provide information, and answer questions related to designing a master schedule around staffing ratios, the impact on scheduling of large numbers of specialized course offerings, the ripple effect of adding new courses and pathways to secondary scheduling, vertical articulation of courses, and streamlining of programs. The staff will receive guidance from us, the Board of Education, in refining any final lists to be brought forward before March 15th. So this is a discussion and informational item. And I'd like to call up the executive team and principals, and thank you so much for joining us and providing us with your expertise.
Right. Thank you so much, Board President Ryan, and each of our great board members, the executive team who's on the line here with us, as well as our principals and assistant principals. And thank you for noting that today is a special meeting of the Board of Education. It's a study session, an opportunity for the board to interact with staff with regards to particular kinds of service and proposed reductions of such. You know, it would be remiss of me if I didn't note before we get started here that earlier today we confirmed with the Los Angeles County Registrar that there are very few uncounted votes with regards to Measure E, and it has likely failed to pass, but that's not been finalized, of course. They are actually in the middle of that right now. I do want to remind the board and the community that the resolution that was passed by the board in December was based on professional polling that had a great influence on the board. With regards to the initial ballot test, I would actually like to read what was put before the voters in the poll back in the fall. And the wording was, shall the San Marino Unified School District measure to renew the expiring school parcel tax at the current rate of $968 per parcel be adopted, continuing approximately $4 million in annual school funding until ended by voters, with annual inflation adjustments, senior exemptions, and all money staying local. If the election were held today, would you vote yes or no on this measure? And in the initial polling test conducted back in the fall, after that wording, the public responded with 51.8% definitely yes, and 26.8% probably yes, which equated to 79% of the voting public saying they would support that ballot. That was tested even against negative arguments, where one of the arguments that was put out there is we already have high school parcel taxes in Southern California. That another negative argument potentially was the measure has a built-in adjustment for inflation. And a third was people are having a hard time making ends meet with the high cost of living, high unemployment, economy now in recession. And a fourth negative argument was this tax will last forever. There is no expiration date. Of those four negative arguments, the one that received the fewest negative percentage points was the tax will last forever. There's no expiration date. So I just want to make sure that we put it out that this had been talked about. It was polled. It polled favorably even after the negative arguments. The yes votes were 76%. And today we have, as most probably everybody on the call has seen, the yes to Measure E has come in around 63% with very few votes left. So I want to start with that because the board carefully considered the polling from the community and all the inputs in making their decision. But having said that, the community has spoken, and now we must adjust to the new reality of another 11% reduction in our expenditures budget. Last year, as you know, we went through a very painful process of reducing many positions on the classified and administrative side, and some reductions in the classroom. The We Are San Marino campaign was successful in restoring 11.2 classroom teaching positions, and we have not received any assurances that any other campaign is forthcoming in the coming days. There are many reasons, I'm sure, behind why Measure E was apparently rejected by voters, and in the days to come, we will be considering much of that and analyzing it together and figuring out how we can do better in the future. But you'll shortly be hearing a report from our Human Resources Department and site administrators about a reduction of over 40 positions. And I want to pause there and say, and these positions actually are linked to human beings who teach our kids, counsel with them, connect with them, play with them, coach them, advise them, and teach them how to be leaders. I want to thank the board for their interest in developing a strategic plan. Never has it been more important for this district to conduct a strategic plan, because now that the community has rejected the renewal of a local funding source, a tax they were already paying, it is incumbent upon us to align our resources, our facilities, our demand for programs, our Board of Education goals, and community priorities so that we are successful and solvent moving forward. I do want to let the board know that if the Board of Education is interested in bringing another ballot measure forward to the public in 2021, we are gathering information from the County Registrar's Office with regards to 3 possible dates, one of which would be June 1st. The difficulty of June 1st is we'd have to get approval from the county to do it, but the 88, you have to place a measure on the ballot 88 days out, and that date would be this coming Friday, March 5th for June 1st. There is the possibility of an August date, and there is certainly the general election in November as a possibility, but we're checking into that for you. So there's many issues to bringing a ballot measure forward that I would like to link to the discussion for today. One of which is this, when the board takes action on the resolution to reduce particular kinds of service, we will then notify teachers before March 15th who are impacted, teachers, counselors, and other certificated personnel who are impacted by the reduction. And of course, those dear folks, those great professionals will begin searching for employment elsewhere pretty quickly. And as you can imagine, with school opening in August, they will have secured positions elsewhere prior to school opening. So if we did bring a ballot measure back later than the June 1st time, we would essentially already have kids with schedules in hand at the high school and the middle school and our elementary programs. And the only way to actually do it in a August or November way is to hire mid-year. And as Mrs. Ryan knows, that does not allow you to recruit the best or even the near best. And I do know there are districts around us who are recruiting teaching positions. So that makes me happy for those that perhaps will not be able to come back with us, but it does put us in a vulnerable position. So there's lots of issues with regards to timing on this, but certainly I don't want to leave with a doom and gloom, because we are going to dig in as a leadership team. We already have. I mean, first thing this morning, we were on with the principals, the executive team, the APs. We've been on twice today. We are looking at the future with hope and with a resolute demeanor that we are going to continue to deliver on a world-class education to our kids. It's not going to look the same. It's not going to feel the same, but that is our task, and we are already at work. So with that, we'll turn to the presentation. So Dr. Choi, if you wouldn't mind going ahead and putting up the first, there you go. So setting the stage for today, the staff is going to present to the Board of Education the complexities of developing a list to reduce particular kinds of certificated services. And as you recall from last year, this is a very, very complex task to develop this. You will hear information related to designing a master schedule related specifically to staffing ratios, the impact on master schedules of large numbers of specialized course offerings. We call those singletons and doubletons. The ripple effect of adding new courses and pathways to secondary master schedules. The impact of creating vertical articulation of courses and streamlining of programs. You will hear about the process of developing an elementary master schedule and the impacts on curriculum and instruction related to programs and processes. And then staff will answer questions and receive guidance from the Board of Education on refining the final PKS list to be brought forward to the Board of Education prior to March 15th. So that sets the stage. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Linda Deloti, who will begin to discuss reduction of particular kinds of service. Linda?
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. President Ryan, members of the board, student board member Vahini, and executive team. As Dr. Wilson mentioned, we're going to be discussing a reduction of certificated particular kinds of services today, and we're going to talk about the timeline involved, which is a statutory and not a district imposed timeline. And so I'd like to ask that Dr. Choi advance to my presentation. Thank you, Dr. Choi. If you'll go to the next slide. So with respect to this table is on the local control funding formula. And I think it's really important for everyone to understand how the district is funded and why it is that we need local revenues to help support how the district is funded. So you see here a table that shows the funded ADA and the base amount per ADA, in addition to the LCFF augmentation grant, which is per ADA, and that is based on our unduplicated count students. And I'm sure the board is aware of what unduplicated count students means, but for anyone who is not, unduplicated count students are foster students, English language learners, and those who receive or are entitled to free and reduced lunch. So districts that have those unduplicated count students receive additional fundamental funding for those students. And then in the far right-hand column, you see the total LCFF funding amount, and you see that that is organized based on grade bands. And so for grades TK through third, the district receives $6,434. For grades 4 through 6, $4,733 is the LCFF funding. So that's the base amount. And grades 7 through 8, $3,651, $883. And grades 9 through 12, $9,831. So the amounts listed here are essential. and are banded by grades. If you go to the third column, you see the LCFF base funding per ADA. And so this is the amount that the district receives without the LCFF augmentation grant, which is, again, similar. You have more money coming into the district to educate high school kids than you would grades TK through third. And that's based on the notion that it is more expensive to educate high school kids than it is TK through third. Next slide, please. So here's a slide that illustrates the fact that our district receives state funding based on ADA and unduplicated count students. So as I mentioned earlier, you see here that we rely on local support to the tune of $4,700 per student, because it costs us about $14,625 to educate each student, and we only get $9,925 from state and federal revenues. And if you look at that far right-hand column, I feel like this really resonates with me in terms of the local support. San Marino obviously requires more local support to remain competitive than any other district that you see listed here. As an example, you have Arcadia Unified. They get $1,686 in local support on top of what they receive through the local control funding formula, whereas San Marino receives $4,700 from local revenue sources on top of the $9,925 that we receive from state and federal revenues. And also, if you look at that third to last column, you will see that we receive less revenue than the majority of the districts listed here in terms of state and federal resources. Next slide, please. So enrollment is an important factor to consider in this situation. As a school district, we know that for several years now, we have been declining in enrollment, which is not unique to San Marino Unified School District. The entire state of California, the majority of districts within the state are in declining enrollment, and according to the Department of Finance, expected to remain in declining enrollment through 2028. And there's a variety of factors involved in why enrollment is down in school districts. But the majority of students that are absent from enrollment, it's due to people leaving the state of California. Most of these families are leaving the state of California due to either unaffordable housing, the parent's business has relocated to another state, so they take their family and their children with them. Taxation in the state of California is very high. And there's just a variety of reasons why people are leaving the state of California. But the biggest factor, according to the Department of Finance, is that it's expensive to live in the state of California. And then when you look at moving into San Marino, it is unaffordable for most young families to move into San Marino. It's very, very expensive to live here. And that, I believe, is another factor involved in why our district is declining in enrollment. So on this particular table, you see Carver's TK through K through grade 5 counts, either based on the CBEDS or our P2 ADA numbers. And so our CBEDS is reported in October. And so when we compare the CBEDS number to the CBEDS number, it is an October number on the same date. Within that month, it's usually, I think it's October 2nd, first, I believe it's the first Monday or Tuesday in each October. And so P2 ADA is in April. And so that number is different from the CBEDS number because it is captured at a different time during the year, and enrollment fluctuates because people come in and out of our schools throughout the year. Next slide, please. So here you see Valentine Elementary School on this table, and you can basically see the CBEDS enrollment TK through K through grade 5. You see also the ADA numbers in the same grade spans. And so that gives you sort of a comparison to look at between those two numbers for 1920, 2021, and 21-22, and 22-23. And so we're really worried about sort of going off what they call the enrollment cliff in 22-23. And part of the reason for our concern is that the district has been held harmless related to ADA due to the COVID pandemic. So what that means is that we are funded in the 2021 school year based on 1920 P2 ADA. And so when we get to the 22-23 year, we will be funded based on our actual P2 enrollment data from the prior year at that point, or the 22-23 school year, whichever is higher, will be able to be funded at. So could you advance to the next slide, please? And so here is the middle and high school on one slide, same thing. We're looking at the CBEDS and ADA numbers from 2019-20 through 2022-23. Can you please go to the next slide? Here's our current K12 enrollment. So this was as of March 1st of this year. Our enrollment is at 2,785 students. We know that our school district, for our size, functions best at 3,200 students. So you can see that we're not quite up to the 3,200 where we function best as far as the master schedule goes and funding resources. Next slide. And I wanted to illustrate for the board the decline in enrollment. And you can see it very clearly here. And I just wanted to point out that the green represents San Marino High School. The yellow represents Huntington Middle School, red represents Carver, and blue represents Valentine. And so you can see where the elementary schools have been pretty steady over the last 5 years. However, they are declining. So if you look at Valentine on the very bottom there, in 16-17, they had 632 students. And in 2021, they have 596. And then if you look at Carver, Carver has actually come up a bit. They were at 581 in 16-17, and now they're at 605 students. The middle school in 16-17 was at 777 students, and this current year they're at 646 students. So there's a definite pattern of declining enrollment here. If you look at San Marino High School, in 16-17 we had 1,110 students, and we currently have 938 students. So there has been a steady decline, at which we expect will continue over the next several years. Next slide, please. Then we wanted to show you the work that we have done to reduce our budget expenditures and our ongoing expenditures. When Dr. Wilson arrived in 1920, we had 185.1 FTE, and we have been able to reduce that to 170.2. And the manner in which we were able to do that was with Dr. Wilson's leadership, creating the Fiscal Resources Task Force, which was comprised of several stakeholders, internal and external, members of the community who are very business oriented, were serving as members of that committee. We also had Vanjie Lingot, who's the director of accounting, serving. Principals were serving, the superintendent, Dr. Choi, and myself. And we were looking at ways to research alternative revenue sources in order to stabilize our budget. So instead of just looking at reductions, we were looking at ways that we could increase our revenues and lower our expenditures. So we did offer an early retirement incentive that was very successful. And we had 17 certificated members of the bargaining unit accept that retirement incentive. And the district did not need to replace all of the positions that were outgoing. In addition to that, we had people who decided they wanted to go somewhere else and work. There were people whose spouse moved out of state. And so through attrition, we were able to realize savings. We did have a reduction in force, wherein we actually laid off 11.2 FTE, and I'm going to show you that a little bit later in the presentation. Now, on the classified side of the house, you can see that in 2016-17, we had 147.29 FTE, which stands for full-time equivalent. And in 2020, 2021, due to Dr. Wilson coming in and looking at our budget and really deciding that we needed to make some structured and targeted reductions, we had 114.45 beginning with this year. So that was a reduction of 32.84 FTE in the classified service, which is really significant for our size district. In addition to that, we reduced administrative positions by 3 full FTE. We reduced 1 assistant principal position at San Marino High School. We reduced an assistant superintendent position at the district office and a director of maintenance and operations position. So we have reduced administrative staff significantly in this period of time as well. Next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about the fact that the Schools Foundation was instrumental in leading a very successful We Are San Marino campaign that allowed us to restore 11.2 FTE that would otherwise have been laid off. And so I have listed those positions for you here. TK through 5th grade, there was 3.0 FTE, music 1.2, Japanese 1.0, English, which includes drama, speech, and debate. All of those positions are required to hold a single subject in English credential. That was 2.0, science was 2.0, secondary counselor elementary counselor 1.0, and a speech and language pathologist 1.0. And so we were able to bring back, based on one-time revenues, 11.2 FTE. Next slide. And then I also wanted to share with the board the particular kinds of services list, which is tied to our declining enrollment and the We Are San Marino campaign and Measure E that we worked on. And when I say we have spent untold hours with our principals and assistant principals at the secondary level, in addition to meeting with our principals at the elementary to look at their current staffing plans, to review graduation requirements, preparing kids for college, making sure that there's vertical articulation between the middle and high schools, ensuring that the programs are really designed to work together. And we have come up with a list that no one likes, but it is tied to all of those factors at the top of the slide here. I also wanted to make the board aware that the resolution that I'm going to be sharing on March 9th for the board's action includes a 0.6 graphic design, 1.0 media arts, and 0.4 yearbook. And those sections were not added to the presentation because we just met with our principals to refine our list prior to this meeting. And so the total is 41 FTE based on all of those factors. Next slide, please. And this is the 21-22 particular kinds of services reduction in force without Measure E. So this, if Measure E were to have passed, this would have been what we would have presented to the board for action on reducing staff, particular kinds of services within the certificated bargaining unit, 8.0. And so I won't spend a lot of time on this slide because it's sort of irrelevant now. And these positions are combined on the larger resolution with the positions that are tied to Measure E and listed on our accountability report related to Measure E. Next slide.
Yeah, could you go back one slide before
Sure.
that?
Before this one or this one?
The one before that.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, I just need to take a picture of it since I didn't get this slide.
Yeah, and please keep in mind that the graphic design 0.6, media arts 0.1, and yearbook 0.4 are not on this one. And I'm going to be sharing the most recent rendition of this with you in just a moment. So I just want that caveat to be known. And let us know when we can move forward.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so just to wrap up this part of the presentation, it's important for the Board of Education to be aware of the process and timelines involved. So we have the statutory deadline of March 15th in which to provide the least senior person in the particular kinds of services categories by March 15th. And this is going to be done this year differently than it has in years past. In prior years, the superintendent and I would sit down along with the president of the Teachers Association, and we would meet face to face with the affected employee and talk them through the process, explain it thoroughly, and really try to be compassionate about the reduction in force process. This year, due to COVID, we are told by council that we need to serve the notices via certified mail return receipt requested, and that they must be postmarked no later than March 15th. And that will suffice for the purposes of having legally served those notices during a pandemic. I'm not sure whether the board is completely aware of the fact that all of the reductions in force are done based on seniority. And so if you have 3 teachers that were hired on the same date at the same time, there may be a tie in seniority. And so instead of us just noticing one person, we're legally obligated to notice the 3, and then we develop tie-breaking criteria that needs to be executed in order to determine which of the 3 is going to be deemed to be the least senior. And so we go through that process, and then that is the person who is going to actually be laid off, and the other 2 would stay. That's just an example. And then credentials within a particular kind of service. You can have, as an example, a kindergarten teacher who also has a single subject in biology or in life science. And so that teacher, if laid off at the elementary, because they happen to be the least senior elementary teacher, we would also have to look at who's the least senior life science person in the district. Because if this teacher has more seniority in life science than somebody who was hired last year, let's say at the middle school, then that individual would have the right to bump that other person out of their job. And so I just wanted to make the board aware that it gets very complicated. And we have very detailed, comprehensive lists within HR that we rely on, and we share with the union, and we share with attorneys to make sure that we're not making any mistakes on who receives a notice. There is, the statute allows for skipping of certain positions if they have specialized training and expertise. Although I'm not sure we're going to have that kind of a situation in San Marino this year. But in case we do, I wanted the board to be aware that we can develop criteria to skip those individuals that have specialized training, so that they are not the one that gets the notice, even if they are the least senior. And then they are entitled to, those people who are laid off, a hearing before an administrative law judge. And so that typically takes place in April. And the hearing is likely to be done virtually this year because of the pandemic. In other normal situations, the administrative law judge and a court reporter come into the boardroom or some other area. And each teacher who is affected is allowed to provide testimony, and the administrative law judge hears that testimony and takes testimony from the district and the district's attorney on each position that is affected, and determines whether or not those positions are accurately noticed, and whether or not they have any other credentials that perhaps weren't registered with the county that we should be taking into consideration. So every person gets their hearing if they so choose. You can opt out of the hearing process, and we've had employees do that before, but most people go forward with it. And the hearing decision from the ALJ is due on April 7th, on or before April 7th. And then the final notices based on the ALJ's determination would be issued by May 15th. So that's the process in a nutshell. And then of course, the Board of Education has the ability to rescind notices at any time after or before the final notice is issued. If we were to receive additional ongoing funds that could be utilized to support additional positions, then the Board of Education can take action in an open session meeting to unwind part or all of the reduction in force resolution. And that, I believe, is the last slide. Are there any questions on any of this? Okay, hearing none, what we have done is, as I mentioned, we worked really, really hard with the principals and assistant principals to really take a deep dive into the data to support the numbers that we have come up with. And so the principals do have information to share with the board. But before we jump to that, I just wanted to just give you a quick look. And I can share, right, Steve, my screen?
Correct.
Yeah. Hold on one second. I just wanted to give you a quick look at the revised, as of this afternoon, list of positions that we are going to be bringing forward to the Board of Education on March 9th. And so this is the more accurate list of positions as opposed to the slide, because we added to that and we took some things off of it when we looked at how it was going to impact class sizes and such. So with that, I will turn it back over to Dr. Wilson to introduce the principals.
And of course, we are looking for questions and comments from board members at the end of the meeting with regards to the PKS list. And so that list may actually be slightly altered when we bring it back to you for action. Okay. All right, Dr. Choi, if you'd go back to the original presentation, we'll turn this over at this point to Mr. Kurtenbach and Mr. Kassam Clay, and they're going to give you some information about how a high school master schedule comes together. And I know the board knows this, but we have to look at we have to consider separately a high school schedule from a middle school schedule, from an elementary schedule. The higher up you go, the more differentiation you get within schedules. And I'll just give you an example of that. When you're a middle school science student, you will likely have earth science in 6th grade, life science in 7th grade, and physical science in 8th grade. When you are a high school science student, you have a wide variety of options for science to take. So you might have a sophomore who has a particular kind of science, and another sophomore has a totally different one, and they're on totally different tracks. So the higher up you get, the more differentiation you get, the more difficulties you find within the master schedule to satisfy the needs of all students. So with that, Mr. Kurtenbach, Mr. Kassam Clay.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. Thank you, members of the board. So let's take a look at the right side of the slide first, building a master schedule. Most people think you just place sections in, you put the kids where they're supposed to go, and everything kind of goes off without a hitch. But this is a long process that we've been engaged in throughout the entire school year. And as a matter of fact, when you do build a master schedule at a high school level, You do engage in that process throughout a full year. It is not an end of the year. It is not a summer activity. And depending on the school site, the smaller the school gets, the more challenging it is to build a master schedule that meets the needs of as many students as possible. But we did hire a fantastic and very talented Mr. Kassam Clay over the summer, which has made that process all the more robust. And it's why we are in a very good position today. So we start by making sure that we have a refined and clear course catalog, and that's actually a process we've been engaging in for the majority of this year as well. That course catalog needs to be aligned with the courses that are approved through UC Doorways, because we want our students' courses to be UC and CSU approved. After that, we go on data gathering, and for that, we engage our students in one-on-one meetings to gather course requests. Now, this is based on what courses do they qualify for in terms of AP and honors and prerequisites for VAPA, CTE, any other electives that have a progression in them. And those course requests then drive the master schedule and section allocation. Give you an example, if we're looking at 11th grade English, of course we have 11th grade English, which is 5-6, but we also have AP Lang and AP Lit. So we really have three main offerings for our English courses for 11th graders. So after we gather up all those course requests, we look at how many sections of each we need based on the number of students we'd like to see in each section. In English, we have typically tried to keep our course numbers below 24, 26, 24. That's kind of our high water mark for English. So let's say, for example, we have 100 requests for AP Lit, 100 requests for AP Lang, and then 50 plus requests for English 5-6. That would mean we would need roughly 4 sections of Lit, 4 sections of Lang, and 2 sections of 5-6. So that's where that adjustment takes place. Now, we use a great program, Power School, which helps look at all the students' course requests. So it takes into account everything that a kid wants to take in the periods 1 through 6. And it takes those sections that we say we need, and it places them in the best position to get the most kids all the courses that they want. The critical pieces, though, along that line are called singletons and doubletons. Now, generally, when you run a master schedule, you want to have no more than 10% of your master schedule be singletons. Singletons are courses that show up one time in the master schedule. Give you an example of our courses. The Huntington Library course is a singleton. It shows up one time in our master schedule. The Caltech STEM course, while we ran 2 sections, they were alternating years. So one was a first year Caltech STEM and the other was a second year Caltech STEM. So still singletons. So the computer and Mr. KC and myself examine where that would best fit in order to get the most students who wish to take that course enrolled, again in periods 1 through 6. We have about 22% of our courses singletons. So we are double the amount that is recommended when you're trying to build a master schedule. So of course, this creates unique and significant challenges for us when we're building it. Most of the time, what we end up doing is after the computer sets all of this up for us and runs the schedule, we then have to physically manipulate and move courses around and then test it over and over again to see if we can get more kids scheduled in by making those moves. VAPA is also a unique structural issue for us. Most of our VAPA courses are progressive. So you start at sort of a beginning, you move to an intermediate or advanced level. This creates, again, a lot of singletons because we don't have the majority of our students taking a VAPA course, but we do have students who've invested a tremendous amount of time into those courses. So VAPA creates some issues as well. We also want to maintain those progressive programs like VAPA, because that's how you build a robust program, is years of access to those programs so that they can build skills. Our honors and AP courses create significant challenges as well. We offer far more AP courses per student than I think any other high school at this point. When we look at our total student enrollment, which is around 930, I believe right now, and I believe with next year's additions of AP Chinese, World History, and Economics, we will be offering, I believe, and Mr. Casey can correct me on this, 17? 18. So we will be offering 18 APs. That's to say nothing of the honors courses that we will be offering as well. Honors courses such as Caltech STEM, Honors Humanity, Honors Physics, Honors Math Analysis, et cetera, et cetera. Those create unique challenges because while they are becoming more robust, they still create oftentimes singletons like Calc AB and Calc BC, or doubletons, courses that show up only twice, which can still create many issues. We also have to consider zero period. Now this year we have very few core courses, actually 0 core courses in our zero period, which is an advantage for students in terms of their learning readiness. Learning at 7 o'clock in the morning is challenging for anybody. For kids in the high school age, it is very challenging, although those are options for us. But as you'll note, we're not starting out by placing sections in 0. We are starting out by examining course offerings to see if any sections need to go into 0. Another thing that we've done this year is we placed athletics for next year into 7th period. This creates an opportunity for us in periods 1 through 6 to offer far more courses when students are ready to learn, and pushes the athletics to outside of the day where, quite frankly, that's where it has been occurring. Our practices are still generally after school, even now. Our games are after school. And we've looked at how this can really build and bolster a strong master schedule. Dual enrollment is another consideration. I know the community as well as our staff have been interested in how this would look at San Marino High School. We are going to be offering dual enrollment courses next year. They will all happen after school. And many people ask, well, why aren't you just offering them during the school day? After school seems to remove the opportunity for some athletes. It might be more of a struggle for people who have other schedules after school. The reason is offering them during the school day will have negative effects on the programs that we are trying to build up. VAPA programs, other course offerings through electives will get negatively affected. Additionally, so would our core courses. For example, if we offered kinesiology as a science credit and students took that, that would reduce our sections for things like physics, chemistry, and biology. And we do have a responsibility to provide sections to our staff for those. And then finally, we are always looking at how we can maximize the talents that we have in our school district and appropriately share resources. And I commend Mr. Daryl Topalian and Ryan Catchwold at the middle school. Those two, along with myself and Mr. Casey, have been meeting every week for this entire school year to look at where we can enhance our programs and our connection for our students by sharing staff. So in the 2021 school year, we have shared our choir, Spanish, and yearbook. And next year, we are looking to expand that potentially into yearbook coding and music and band. Mr. Casey, anything to add about building a master schedule since you have done the lion's share of the work this year for certain?
Not much. That was excellent overview. The only thing I would add is when we do build the master schedule, we do start with those singletons and we build around. So we build around those singletons to make sure that there's as few conflicts as possible. And we'll even take that down to the individual student. to see if there's any conflicts, to make sure that we're placing those courses appropriately. And a lot of the adjustments happen because our counselors are putting together such good data right now. And when I say good data, they're meeting with students and spending time going over what they want to, what their goals are, and what they want to take for next year. And that's definitely a time-intensive process.
As you look to the left, it's a discussion about the impact of the reductions that we just spoke of with Dr. Deloti. Obviously, you saw on there dance, you saw music, you saw drama, and this will definitely mean a different looking high school for certain. Obviously, with the reductions that we are looking at, the ability to offer those programs will be significantly reduced. In some cases, almost fully eliminated, if not eliminated. This is based on our ability to adequately staff and then provide the type of education needed within those courses, considering class sizes. And our number one mission is school safety and having the appropriate number of students who can get the instruction from our high quality educators. As you saw, one of the reductions that was proposed is a reduction of the drama down from 1.0 essentially to 0 FTE. Does that mean we will have no drama? It means it's highly unlikely that we will be able to field a drama program. It may be one section, it may be two, it may be none. It depends on us making sure that we have first all of our English and math, science, social studies, core courses that our students need provided to them. And then looking at what we can add based on the credentials and the experience that remain at the school site. So that doesn't necessarily mean no. It just means very, very, very different. And our primary goal is those core courses which our students need to, of course, qualify for college and career beyond San Marino High School. The same goes for CTE. As you saw there, there was graphic arts, digital filmmaking, and coding. While we are required to offer some form of a college and career pathway, which we would still do through our business program, we do not need to offer 4 pathways. So we're looking at what pathways are currently less robust, and that's where some of those recommendations came from. Does that mean we will not offer any of those? Again, it does not necessarily mean that. It means that we start with our core and then we build out from there, offering as many programs as possible, given the staffing that we have. I listed ELA, science, math, and social studies because those will obviously be affected by increased class size and reduced sections offered because we will have less staff to offer them. In considering what those class sizes might look like, as I said, in English, we try to keep those class sizes between 24 and 26. Based on the reductions that are recommended, we would see those class sizes reach potentially the mid-30s, depending on the course itself. As I said, if we have a higher number of students who request AP classes and we can get them into those classes, those might be larger than maybe our just college preparatory classes. It is an imprecise and it is nothing that I can say we will exactly have this many at this point because we are still gathering course requests. We are currently meeting with our freshmen. And then after spring break, we will be meeting with our 8th graders, which will have an additional effect on our planning. Mr. KC, anything else to add on the impacts of reductions?
No, nothing to add.
All right, thank you so much.
Dr. Wilson, you're muted.
Okay, thank you so much, Mrs. Ryan.
At this time, I want to just first thank Dr. Deltori for her work. As an administrator, this is one of the most painful things that an administrator has to do is look at these numbers because we see directly how it impacts the students and how it affects the classroom. So with that being said, I also want to extend a thank you and an appreciation for our high school for looking at this. Jason, are you opening up for questions now or at the end?
Dr. Wilson, it's up.
I'm open, Mrs. Ryan, if I'll kind of leave that to your discretion. We could just wait for the end. The board could get all their information and then have those questions, or if it's better from your perspective to do that now.
I think because the presentation is fresh right now, and we've already seen Dr. Deltori and Jason and Mr. Kassam Clay present, that we can now just stop for some questions and some statements, if you will. Who would like to start from the board? I can't see. Okay, thank you, Mrs. Chung. You want to begin? Sorry, I can't see everybody. Now I see some people.
Hi, thank you. So I just wanted to say before I started that this is a discussion item today. The whole point of today is a study session. And so, we will be taking action most likely at our next board meeting on March 9th. I want to acknowledge Mr. Kalaki's concerns about the ability to make comment. I think this is a lot. It's a lot to sit inside. And I think it would be beneficial for everyone to be able to have a few days to sit in it and to be able to reach out to us over the next week. And so I really want to encourage everybody to do that, to make public comment at next week's meeting. After now hearing all this information, to reach out to us personally. We need to know where the community's heart is at, the school community, and what is important to everyone here. I think we're all feeling a little shell-shocked. So thank you for all of the work. I feel like we're kind of, because of all the work everyone's been doing, we're kind of ahead in being able to even have this conversation right now, rather than having to put it off to next week, which would have been really hard to do in one fell swoop. So yeah, so I just want to encourage everybody really to reach out to us and tell us what your values and priorities are now that you had time to sort of look at all this. And I think all of this will be available as linked from the board agenda. Now on that note, I'll kind of go into a question. What I didn't see on, so I'll start with Dr. Deltori. I had one question for you. Do you anticipate any COVID mitigation loss funding to be able to make any sort of positive impact on any of these things that we're doing, given the limitations around how much money we're getting and the allowable uses?
That's a very good question, and thank you for posing that question. I am working currently with School Services of California on the amount of money that the school district will be receiving related to the grants that are available under SB 86. I do know that we're going to get ESSER 2 monies, which are restricted to COVID-19 related expenditures in the amount of $1 million, but we have to spend all of that money on COVID related expenses. As far as the other grants, like the extended learning grant, I am currently, as I mentioned, working with Robert, and he's going to send me the information hopefully tonight or tomorrow. So I should be prepared to speak to that with more specificity on the 9th, next Tuesday. And I certainly will update the board in the weekly board memo if I have the information that you are seeking by then. So I know that the governor is going to provide a lot of one-time money for school districts, and San Marino will receive less of it because a lot of it is based on the number of unduplicated count students that you have in your district. And some of it isn't, like the Safe Schools for All reopening grant money that we have applied for is likely to be $450 per student. And we had to qualify that based on having our CSP posted on our website, along with the checklist from County Health, and then a memorandum of understanding with our bargaining groups, which basically say that we're going to have a variety of safety measures in place and that the associations agree with that. So we have been able to sign off on a memorandum of understanding with the association, and we were open prior to February 1st with TK through 2nd, in addition to having our cohorts of special education back on our campuses by that date. As again, I will provide more specifics on the rest of it. Hopefully, fingers crossed, by this Friday in the weekly board memo.
And it's important to note, Mrs. Chan, as well. It's a great question. Something Linda and I've talked about several times here. It's important to note that you, by rule of thumb, you don't use one-time funds for ongoing positions, right? Because we have to develop a budget that is approved by the county for 3 years out. And so, yeah, if you take one-time money and you sustain positions with it, you can't sustain them out past the sunsetting of that money, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, and just in case the public doesn't know what unduplicated pupil counts are, because that's terminology that's sort of internal. That's all the students we have that qualify in one of 3 areas for additional funding under the LCFF. So that would be low socioeconomic or free and reduced lunch students, second language students, so ELD students, and then foster youth. And the reason they call it unduplicated is you only get to count them one time. So if you have an ELD student who's also a low socioeconomic student, you only get credit for them one time. So just to give you a little definition on that. Thank you.
Thank you. And then my other question is to Mr. Kurtenbach. Thank you for a very comprehensive approach to educating us on this. What I didn't see on here or here in your presentation was how we're addressing counseling, because I did see that as some of the funding that was tied. And I'm wondering if you can give a little bit of background into what that might look like. And yeah.
That will be very difficult. Will be very difficult. We would essentially be reduced to 3 comprehensive counselors at the high school. And those 3 comprehensive counselors would be doing all of the work that our 4 currently do, plus our wellness counselor. So there would be a shared division from the 5 to 3. And that would include all the work that's being done on college applications and writing letters of recommendation, as well as the one-on-one meetings that we have to do course requests and 4-year planning. That's where it would sit now if the resolution that was proposed with those cuts was to take place.
Sorry, I'm not sure if I heard you correctly. So the comprehensive counselors would take on the academic advising, the college and career readiness, and the wellness.
Yes, we would have 3 counselors. Right now we have 5. We have 4 comprehensive counselors who are dealing with the entire student body in terms of college and career readiness, and all of their courses, applications to college, etc. Then we have 1 counselor in the Wellness Center who is really in charge of that wellness component, social, emotional, MTSS type. And we would be reduced to 3 who would be in the counseling office, and we would figure out at that point the shared division of duties in terms of how we would cover the needs of the school with those 3, Mr. KC and myself.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chang, any questions or comments so far?
Oh, yes. First of all, I want to ask Principal Jason, since you already mentioned about the Caltech honor class and also Huntington Humility class, and pretty soon we will have a due enrollment. The reason I mentioned about these 3, because these 3 we make an effort and make a PR, and eventually we get this commitment from the school or the civic organization. So in the meantime, right now, we get a big hit. So we need to reduce our teacher. So I just want to remind how important to keep those programs, but in the meantime, how we want to restructure for entire the teacher, the teaching, the foundation. Yeah.
Well, to speak briefly to especially those two programs, the Huntington Library and the Caltech STEM course, currently we have 2 staff members, 2 teachers that teach each section. So again, if this were to come to pass, the way that we have promoted it, it would be reduced to 1 teacher per section rather than 2. Obviously, that would make the most sense moving forward. But we would also take a look at whether or not we should reduce sections. I mean, right now we have 2 for Caltech STEM. They are a year 1, year 2. There is a possibility that maybe combining them into 1 could work. We would have to do a lot of work on that to see how that would function. The Huntington Library is at 1 section, so we would need to keep it at that level. But I think another piece that you brought up in my mind when you were speaking, Mr. Chang, was, you know, when we're looking at partnerships with outside institutions, this is something we'd have to discuss very carefully. Dr. Deloti would be an intimate part of that conversation and making sure that we are doing what is permitted within Ed Code, that we are following our contract with our association, and that we are appropriately making connections with other institutions that would be ongoing and robust and wouldn't be a negative toward, again, Ed Code, association, all the different rules that we have to follow, which again is why really dual enrollment has taken this long to come to San Marino. There are a lot more rules once you get into the details that need to be followed and need to be mitigated in order to pull something like that off.
Okay, and then I have a comment. Since today we have a lot of audience, as you know, I've been served for the 20 years as a school board member. So last night the information is a big hit to all us, especially for me. For the last 20 years, no matter what, eventually, you know, we will pass. Yeah, for the percentage. No matter it's a 2/3 or the major majority. So this is the first time I think the community need to understand, you know, the entire school community and also entire San Marino community, they need to recognize how important to support for the school. Yeah, people, they may say that I always support the school, but this time I don't see they really support the school. People have a different point of view. End up, this is the first time. I said that it is the first time. I think it's a big hit for our school community. So I mean with that, if we cannot have another resolution and get to the vote, eventually we need to accept the fact. And then I think from the parent, the teachers, the staff, administrator, and even the senior citizen, they need to realize there's no free lunch. Everyone need to contribute their effort and the time, including the money. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chang. Mr. Barbary, please.
So just a couple things. The first being, you know, I think that the administration is committed to finding all, back to just Ms. Chan's comment a little bit earlier, I think the administration is committed to finding whatever money that's available and use it the best way that it can be used. This conversation is a little bit of a procedural one in that we have a statutory deadline that we have to notice somebody by March 15th. We kind of were up against this last year. And again, you know, for example, the We Are San Marino campaign was able to save certain positions. So it's not that this doesn't necessarily mean it's the end. As Dr. Wilson pointed out, we may consider another resolution. Hopefully we could work it out in June, because I think that makes the most sense. But we're up against something that we can't go around. We have to make this notice by the 15th if we are going to make a reduction in force at the end of the school year. So while these numbers certainly aren't pretty, I feel like, as Mr. Chang pointed out, I feel like the community really didn't maybe didn't understand the whole the resolution and the permanence of it. I think that was certainly what I heard from a lot of the community, that they were concerned about that. I think that there was a lot of misinformation that was being spread, and I think that was really unfortunate, because some people took comments that were not correct at face value. There absolutely is a way that a permanent resolution and permanent parcel tax can be reversed. The board put additional safeguards in place for additional review. That was the resolution that we passed a few meetings ago, and I felt that addressed the little bit of truth that there was a cost to those who might bring that sort of resolution forward. I think we hit those, and I think that people just continue to spread misinformation about this. So on these positions particularly, I know we haven't gone through the rest of the schools, but we've kind of seen Dr. Taylor-Torrey's full list. That we're going to have to notice a long list of people. If that's the ultimate list, if we're able to pass another resolution, or if there's some source of funding, which there's always a possibility. Maybe there's some positions that we can save, or if enrollment goes up significantly, again, another place where we might be able to save some teachers. And in fact, we may have to save some, because if we have, for example, a mass of elementary age kids, we may have to bring in more teachers. So I wouldn't say this is the end, but unfortunately, just like last year at the same time, we were kind of addressing the same issue, or a similar issue, that we have to make these notices by the 15th of March. And again, I don't think anybody on this board likes this list. I think anybody in the administration doesn't like the list either. And it's just, at some point, the math has to work. And unfortunately, that's where we are right now. I do hope that we can figure out some sort of resolution or some sort of parcel tax in the future that will make up for these losses. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barbary. Mrs. Chandlin, please.
You're muted, Mrs. Chandlin.
Thank you. The first thing I'd like to mention is to Mike Kalaki, thank you for bringing up that public comment. I would say that is really important, that we should definitely consider making that change so that the public can speak after the presentation. I agree, it's very difficult being on the other side when I wanted to make comment, but didn't really know what the whole presentation would be. So I think it is very important. And as Jane said, this is a lot of information, and we absolutely hope to hear from the community, tonight, in the next few days. I know that sometimes it's hard to wait till the next meeting because you sort of forget, and so much is going on every day. So we definitely want to hear from you by email, text, phone, whatever it is, because this is really important, and the positions being cut, weigh heavy on all of the students and their outcomes. Secondly, to Mr. Barbary's comments, those comments just made me think that, I wonder where we are and if it's possible to, get something on the June ballot for this measure. It seems that there were a lot of people in this community who were concerned about the fact that this was an in perpetuity tax. And so, I hope that we can look into figuring that out potentially for the June 1st, which, means that we're going to have more meetings really soon in the next few days. So that will be something that we'll be talking about and looking into, I hope. And then thirdly, regarding some of these positions, I have some questions. I know that our counseling department for the high school had already been cut, and to Mr. Kurtenbach's points, it will be a hit. And so I just wonder if there's a way to go back to the drawing table and see if, eliminations can be somewhere else, because I know that counseling is so important to these high school students as they are heading off to college, and they need more support, not less. I'm wondering if in other areas like foreign language, I see that we're looking to potentially cut 2.6 positions there. Will we be able to offer that back through PCC and through dual enrollment? I know that there's just a lot there, but I think that maybe finding ways of how, we can work in PCC and have offerings to students when we have to cut here will be really, really important. I see that we're looking at losing drama, and personally, I loved my 4 years of drama at San Marino High School. I don't know exactly how much drama high school kids take today, especially at San Marino High School. Maybe, coding and band and other things are much more important. But I just think it's really, really important that we fully understand what the students really want and what they need to be in that highly selective pool for colleges that they want to go to.
Thank you, Mrs. Chen-Lin. My comment to the presentations is just that I know you guys have spent long hours poring over the data and looking at the numbers and looking at the master schedule. I'm wondering at what percentage we looked at courses and people versus types of services. Is there some sort of percentage that you can provide for me in terms of elimination? Like, if we're only looking at eliminating positions and classes, are we looking at other things such as services? So for instance, I'm thinking if we have Chinese 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, have we looked to combine 1, 2, 3, and 4 together if the classes are small? Have we looked at partnerships with the San Marino Chinese Club? And then I know Jason made a comment, or Mr. Chang made a comment regarding our partnership with an institution like Huntington Gardens and Caltech. I actually see that San Marino can increase our sections instead of decrease because they meet our requirements for our children. So whether they are physiology, biology, or chemistry, there are institutions, whether it's PCC, Caltech, that also meet those needs. And when we're looking at the blended classes, like the art history and the English language arts class, that really served to help and differentiate our students. So maybe, I don't know if Dr. Deloti or if the high school staff want to speak to those questions or my comments.
I would defer to Principal Kurtenbach to talk about that.
Gee,
So you
thanks,
kicked it
Linda.
down the road. Thank
Well,
you.
Jason, can I front load it? Those are great comments and really from all the board members. I mean, this is wonderful because you guys give us so much to think about. You know, in regards to several of the comments, that's where my comment about a strategic plan is going to be so important, because what comes out of that is matching all of those interests, right? And priorities and community needs, and who is our population and what are students requesting. And so that's really, really important for setting the stage for how we pivot as a district here. And when you start talking about pivoting in education, it really is a much larger question that's out there, which is, what is education going to look like 10 years from now? What is a K12 education going to look like, especially when you start talking about high school? And what are we going to learn coming out of this pandemic about people's demands for different ways of learning than what the traditional way would be? You know, you pull into that the bureaucratic part of this, or the financial part of it, and how school districts are funded right now. The model is, you know, rear ends in the seats get you funding, right? But as we've seen, the state is trying to figure out how to pivot to get us our revenue when we can't have kids in the seat, right? And the question long run is, how is that going to shift for us? For instance, if we began to offer a San Marino virtual academy or school that became a permanent part of who we are, you know, what are the funding rules around that going to be? What are the class ratios going to be? These are really big educational questions that are out there right now. And so I think, if I understand you, Mrs. Ryan, great thoughts on that, because when you start looking at things like ELD and you start looking at, you know, foreign languages, or really any courses that advance over time, the questions surrounding that are going to be, how could you reconfigure that to deliver the right content, right, within a different construct than what we're used to? So I think those are huge questions, and I look forward to discussing that in depth with the board over the coming years here. So Mr. Kurtenbach, you want to take off from that point?
Yeah, so I mean, the look at courses. So when we've been going through these discussions for quite some time in preparation for what we thought would never be here, but you got to be prepared. And we look at course requests and enrollment in courses. So this year we looked at how many students are enrolled in these programs. And we actually have quite a few of our courses already. We call it stacking, where we stack multiple levels in one period. Not a great way to deliver education. You are splitting a teacher's attention. You are splitting their ability to provide feedback and interaction with students. But sometimes it's the best way to deliver it, especially when you're in a small school district such as ours. So we looked at that, and then we're looking at course requests. So how many students are requesting this course versus how many students are requesting another course. And then we look at how many students are having that as a secondary request, which means there's a growing interest in one area versus another. We have a strong and growing Chinese program within our school. We have a pretty strong Spanish program. I referenced those as you brought them up. And those courses are actually pretty full right now. We couldn't really stack multiple levels in there. And we only would do that if there was a real need to do that in order to just get the course in the schedule. We always look at the ideal of keep that course separate, run it as high as you can, look at another course. If that course is either really low enrollment or the only way to get it in is in that period, then you look at whether or not you could do some stacking. So we're always looking at that, because we know that we have to use those tools when we're dealing with a school such as ours, where we want to bring as many programs as possible to as many students. But we also know that we have limited amount of sections, teachers, and periods to offer them. We always shoot for the ideal, though. Having a teacher teach multiple sections, as several of ours do, does provide a much lower level of education, in my opinion. This is not to say anything of the teacher doing it. I mean, a teacher who can do that, I taught as I'm sure many of our educators here tonight have. I taught multiple grade levels at one time when I taught middle school in the same classroom at the same time. So it can be done. It's just not near as robust. When we look at other programs and connecting with other institutions, the critical piece there is making sure that we are following our contract with our association, ed code, and doing things in a way that we can maintain them for years going on. When I look at Caltech STEM and I look at the Huntington, those are great programs and we are going to keep them. But having the connection with those institutions doesn't provide us an instructor. It does not provide us a reduced cost. It merely provides us a connection to a lot of great things that those institutions can bring to bear for our kids. Now, the possibility of actually doing research at Caltech when you're in high school, unbelievable, fantastic. Does not help us with funding, does not help us with teacher ratios. So those are things that we would look to continue to bring to our school as long as there is a student need. And again, I always go back to when we're building a master schedule, it is driven by student course requests. So we're not making decisions like, you saw coding on there. We're not saying get rid of coding because we don't want coding. We're saying out of all of the CTE pathways, which one is least requested? Which one is least robust currently? That's not to say it would not have grown or could not grow. I don't know if we're going to eliminate it or not, but that's what we look at to make our decisions. This is data driven. It has nothing to do with the effectiveness of the teacher. It has nothing to do with personalities. It is all about data. Course requests drive what we do in our master schedule.
So President Ryan, we started with the accountability report, those positions that are specifically tied to Measure E, the positions that we brought back last year from the We Are San Marino campaign. And we met with our principals and assistant principals to look at that in terms of their master schedules and to see whether or not they could make that work. Is there a possibility you can make this work? Or do we need to do some, for lack of a better term, horse trading on some of these positions because of the course requests that Principal Kurtenbach is referencing? And also wanted to make sure that the courses that are offered at the middle school are offered at the high school. Because if they exist at the middle school and not at the high school, it doesn't make sense. And so we're trying to bring all of those pieces together. And that's the work that we have been doing as staff, for several weeks now, trying to refine that, even up to, right before this meeting with conversations about reducing the number of reductions in English and increasing in other areas so that we can come up. We have to reduce our budget by $4.1 million. And so all of those pieces have to come together, and we still want to be able to provide an excellent education for students in San Marino. That is our call, and that's what we want to do. And Dr. Wilson has made it very clear that we are all going to roll up our sleeves and do the best job that we can to make sure that we're putting students first. And so we've done it within that framework. I just wanted to make sure you understood that.
No, absolutely. And I agree with Jason and what he's saying. I just wanted him to explain in terms of what it means when we have certain sections within one classroom. And I want us to also think about the support for the teachers and the students, whether it be a second language learner, a special ed student, or a language learner. But I also want to make sure that we're looking at the reach that we have in the community. We have so many resources with Huntington Garden and Library, and also with Caltech. But we also talked about internships with Huntington Hospital, We talked about our partnership with PCC. There are many areas and career areas where we can help the students to differentiate. I see this as perhaps it challenges us as a board, as a team, to really step outside of the box and just crush the box by saying, we don't know that in August we are going to be back in traditional roles and classrooms. We don't know that it won't be hybrid still. We are not clearly defined in terms of funding and formulas for specific groups. And so when we're looking at all of those, I also want our staff to kind of reach a little bit and do that, that dream wish that if we could have that second class with Huntington Library, what would that mean for some of our kids that or we could alleviate somewhere else and give that option. If this class, if this 9th grade class is really into the liberal arts and VAPA, what does it mean? Because even within the grade levels, I feel we can differentiate our services and programs. So I don't want us to only look at just numbers. I want us to look at the big picture of the programs, the services. That's all. I wasn't, I am not the expert here. You guys are the expert, but I want to just pose that out there and make sure. Ms. Fahini has been waiting patiently, and I need to get her in. She'd like to just make some comments. Would that be all right with the board? Yeah, okay. So we're going to do a thumbs up. Fahini, do you want to unmute yourself and come on in?
Yes, I'm unmuted. So I just want to emphasize Ms. Lynn's point about the counseling department. I know San Marino High School really prides itself on having college readiness resources for its students. And I think a lot of that comes from the counseling department itself. For example, I've had 3 different counselors at my time at San Marino High School, and I was lucky enough to have established relationships with them beforehand, which made the college application process a lot easier for me and made my college experience a lot better. It helped me plan and just be prepared for college and my future, which I know is the point of counselors. And I think if we reduce these counseling positions, it will decrease the level of personalized relationships between students and counselors and the support that they can provide each student, which is why I think it's very important to protect the counseling department. So I hope that's taken into consideration before next Tuesday.
Thank you. Ms. Chong?
Hi, sorry, I started looking at other stuff and I just had a couple other questions from the list. I kind of feel like, I know we're talking a lot about it, but I wanted to be able to have this chance to find out more. The ELD, SLP, and the PE position. Can somebody speak a little bit to how that's going to impact the?
I'm not sure if it's just me, but I can't hear you.
Oh.
Is it, can you guys hear her?
No.
Okay, you're kind of faded out there.
Okay, let me try this again. Okay, is it coming through now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. So I was looking at the list that Dr. Deloti had presented, and I realized that we didn't really discuss ELD positions, SLP, speech language pathologist positions, and physical education secondary positions. So I was just wondering if somebody could speak a little bit about how that might impact the programs and the students.
Sure. So with respect to the ELD positions, we had multiple conversations with the principals and assistant principals, Dr. Richter, myself, and we adopted a board policy many years ago that declared every teacher that we employ will have an authorization to provide services to limited English proficient students. And the idea behind that board policy was that we were going to support and pay for these authorizations. And there was a program being offered through LACO at the time that we sent a lot of our teachers to. And I think there was another university that was supporting programs in English language proficiency for teachers to have that authorization because prior to, and I can't remember what the date was, but a certain date, teachers weren't coming out of their teacher prep programs with an authorization. So they had to get it separately. But we knew that we needed to provide those services to students. And we didn't necessarily at that time want to have them pulled out and segregated in EL classes. And so we made that decision, and the board was supportive of that. And then we added EL positions back as a pull-out program when we started with the LCAP, and we wanted to make sure that we were providing targeted services to those students under our local control accountability plan. So now that we're talking about it again, and we have the need to reduce services, and we're looking at how other districts provide services to LAP students, other schools are not providing services where there's the pullout program. And so we discussed it with the principals and assistant principals and even some of the teachers, and they believe that it is doable to be able to meet the requirement to provide students with this support in every classroom. And we would be providing professional development to teachers over the summer to refresh them in this area, and Dr. Richter would lead that effort. So that is the thinking and the plan behind moving that forward. And currently we have 2.2 FTE on the list, and we have 2.6 sections being offered in, or FTE being offered district-wide. So we would plan to keep one section of EL at the high school and one section of EL at the middle school. And Dr. Richter was sharing with me that I believe there are only 10 students identified as English language learners at the high school, or 10 kids that are receiving services, right, Dr. Richter?
Correct. 10 students that are currently enrolled in a core ELD course.
Right. And so oftentimes what happens is our parents sign their students out of EL because they want their kids to be able to take some of the AP courses that are available, and they don't want them to be in a pull-out EL class. So we are faced with that challenge in San Marino as well. Oh, and you asked about speech and language pathology. So currently we have 4 FTE in the category of SLP district-wide. And when Dr. Wilson joined us as superintendent, one of the things that he did related to managing our budget effectively was to engage a professional expert in coming in to look at how we're delivering services to see where we might be able to reduce. And one of the recommendations was in SLP. So last year we had on our resolution to reduce particular kinds of services, one SLP. That SLP position was brought back with the We Are San Marino one-time money. And so that is why you see that on the list again, because it's tied to one-time money. And I'm sorry, Mrs. Chong, what was the other one?
The last one was the PE secondary.
Oh, yes, so PE secondary, I believe now we have 1.0 on the list, and that is Huntington Middle School. Huntington Middle School currently has 2 full-time equivalents in PE, and the high school only has 1. And so it would afford each of those secondary schools with 1 FTE, and we would be reducing PE at the elementary at each school. And way back when that was a position that I believe was funded by the PTAs, and then the district started funding that position. In many other districts, PE is taught by the gen ed teacher, and there isn't a separate full-time PE teacher at elementary schools. It's very unusual to find that. And so when we looked at what we could cut, and our PE teachers are amazing, and we hate to lose them. They're wonderful. They are just have great programs at each of the schools. So this is no reflection on them whatsoever. but that was one of the areas that is funded by Measure E.
Mrs. Chenlin?
I want to make one point about PE. Since Dr. Wilson came from Arcadia, I wonder if you know about this program that Arcadia had. I went to Arcadia Elementary School, and I remember that our elementary PE was taught by high school students. Were you a part of that?
Yeah.
Do you know about
Yeah, it's called cross-age PE. Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know, how much that takes on the back end to make that happen. I'm sure it's a lot of work to coordinate that. But I will say that, that I don't know if that is a possibility and if that would help. But I will say that I think helps students so much. That was an amazing program where as elementary students, we got to really look up to high school students and have that amazing opportunity to see them, working and being so responsible. And I imagine for high school students, that is a huge opportunity to engage with younger kids, but to feel really responsible and to be there. And I mean, PE was so much fun and we did great activities. We learned so much. They gave awards once a week. I mean, it was the best part of my elementary experience there, honestly. So, I just wonder if, those are possibilities we can look into as opposed to taking away a high school counselor where we can't, make up for that, right? Like there's nobody who can step into that. So just if there are ways that we can think outside the box, as Mrs. Ryan said, and, find other ways to fulfill these positions that we have to let go and keep what we can't fulfill in other ways. I think it's just so important for us to get creative. And I also, Dr. Wilson, really appreciate that at the beginning of this conversation, you mentioned that now is the time that we absolutely have to focus on the strategic planning of this district and the goals. I mean, with this happening, I will say some people, have said throughout my day today, like, oh no, well, without Measure E, like, why even bother dealing with a strategic plan? Well,
it's the opposite.
It is absolutely. Yeah. Otherwise, we just shut our eyes and fold.
Absolutely.
So I really hope that we will really get clear on the strategic plan and our goals. And I think that would even further help us understand what we need and what will bring students back and what we really can let go of.
Yeah, thank you. It's going to be such an exciting process. I can't wait.
Great.
And as far as I love the idea of stepping on the box, Mrs. Ryan. I've never heard anybody say that. I love it. It's always outside the box, but I love crushing the box. That's the opportunity, of course, right? And so great thoughts. Thank you.
All right. So our next up, you want to call the next presenter?
Yes. Okay. We're on to our wonderful middle school team. And I do want to stress, I think what you heard in the presentation with the high school is I'm just so pleased with our leadership team and how these guys are working together. I'm telling you, in just a short amount of time, having these two great APs that Daryl and Jason were able to secure, and their backgrounds. I mean, both of them have great high school and middle school backgrounds. And they've come in and added so much value to that team. So you're hearing, I mean, truly a process that's been ongoing for months and months and months. And I just want to pause and say that. So with that, Daryl Topalian and our assistant principal, Ryan Katchel. And Stephen, go ahead and put that presentation up. Okay, there you go.
Well, great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Board President Ryan, board members, student board member Vahani, and Superintendent Dr. Wilson and the executive team. I also want to thank Mr. Kurtenbach and Mr. Kassan Clay for their presentation. It really helps, and I hope it helps the board understand just what we're going through and as far as the intricacies of what it'd like to plan a master schedule at the high school level. But at the middle school level, it's a little bit different. It's not quite as complex. And so I'm thankful to have Mr. Cashel with me as my right-hand man here at as an AP. And so as many as you know, having a the great assistant principals, Mr. Kurtenbach knows, really helps in the future of the school that we're running and what we're leading. And during this time, it becomes extremely important. So as we look at this at Huntington Middle School, you know, it reminds me of my 7th grade social studies teacher, Mr. John Lopez, would say, always, what does it look like, feel like, taste like? And so when he would ever describe that, I remember as a student, and then when I was working with him as a school counselor and as an AP and as an ELD teacher, he would say that in staff meetings. But we could always relate to that because then we knew what was kind of coming, and he would say that to us to challenge us to what it would look like as a school. Unfortunately for us now, we don't have that because this is all new. So what does it feel like, taste like? Well, we know it's going to hurt. We know it's complex. We know it's difficult and it's painful. And so we do know that, but what do we do with that? Well, we do the best of what we can, and we're going to continue to do that. So what does it look like for Huntington? Well, some of the factors that we have is that we're obviously looking at a reduction in our resources and we're looking at our awareness and increases in our class sizes. What we're looking at, the complexity, you know, obviously, as I mentioned, we're not as complex as the high school, but we do have our own complexities as Huntington. We're that middle child, right? You have the elementary and you have the high school, and here we are caught in the middle, and how we're embracing these young people coming to us and from 5th grade into 6th and 7th and 8th. And then we want to develop them and nurture them and their growth, and not just their academics, but also as the whole child, and then get a good foundation. So that when they do go across the street to San Marino High School, that those teachers and administration and the counseling department embraces the great people that we develop here from the great instructional staff that we have here at Huntington. It's definitely going to be looking at how we're going to prioritize and protect our core classes, and then also the robust and the efficiency of our elective and our VAPA programs. And then our master schedule is driven a little bit differently. It is by student selection online, especially in the elective areas, but the core classes are obviously significantly different because those are already automatically placed for our kids. Where it gets different, obviously, is when we look at our honors courses, where we do have not so much the singletons like what the high school has. We do have multiple honors courses where our singletons lie, and some of those specializes in the VAPA and the elective programs. So for us, it's going to be a little bit on a smaller scale, like I mentioned, opposed to San Marino High School. We are looking at definitely an increase in our class sizes and some of these reductions that we'll be looking at. Most of those reductions, obviously we're going to look at increased class sizes in our English, social studies, math, and science classes. Also where it changes is at the honors level for us as well. And so in looking at how that's going to impact our honors classes. The HMS students selective choices, the high school is obviously different from the high school. The students here are just definitely more limited to what they can pick. But now going back to, I believe, board member Chan mentioned, and as board member Ryan mentioned, the efficiency of our schedule, like looking at some of our classes where we can combine. And so we're definitely looking at that. So where we have, for example, where we would have Spartan band, which is our 6th grade band, we're combining where we would have maybe into the mid-20s of those kids in each of those 2 sections, combining in one and having a class that be in the mid to upper 40s. It's a way that we can make that happen. Again, not cutting the program, but helping that program and sustaining it, but still building the program. And so you would have that one section. So those are the things that we're really being creative and looking at so we can continue on. Obviously you saw that reduction in science. And so obviously there's some equality across the board. We're looking at our cores. We have a 3.6 and looking at with mirroring some of the other core classes that we have, like in math, social science, and English. So there's 3 core teachers in each of those areas. So that would be covered. And so it would mirror that as well. Obviously, when we look at our grade 6, that's going to be the biggest challenge for us. One of the factors that we've had here and what's been a benefit of here at Huntington is those smaller class sizes. When we look at the impacted program of grade 6, is that we do have a little bit of a smaller class size, smaller than what they have at 5th grade, where they're up in the upper 20s, where we're not in the mid 20s. And so, which is kind of nice actually, because here you have this new middle school experience. And so that's going to definitely change. Those numbers will definitely go up from the mid 20s up to the high 20s. For our 6th grade teachers as a result of that. Is it going to be a little bit more difficult with that? Yes, but I have confidence in the instructional staff that we have at the 6th grade team that it's going to work out well. And then that transition. It is definitely a nurturing year because the kids are definitely more concrete in their thinking. But we've really challenged our teachers and they've done a really great job building those kids from the 6th grade level to the 7th grade level. When we're looking at our electives, if you can see one of the ones with our VAPA, and I just alluded to that, just looking at those course classes that we have where we might be to condense, and some of the specialty classes that we're normally used to having, like jazz band, like wind ensemble, combining those classes together so you have it in one period. And it might not be called that, it might be called advanced band, it might be called something different. But again, condensing those where they have two separate sections and condensing it into one and being creative at that level for us. We also believe that we can reduce the 5 to 7 sections simply through that type of efficiency and our master scheduling. And one of the big things that, as alluded to, as Mr. Kurtenbach just said with Mr. KC, myself, and with Mr. Cashel, is we meet weekly. These are ongoing discussions that we have, not just about this information is obviously really new to us, and as far as with Measure E, but about the alignment piece and things that we can do here at Huntington Middle School to align with the high school. So we talk about this bridge and building our school communities together. So our kids can see and our families can see what we're doing here at Huntington Middle School and building and preparing our young people for what they're going to take place at San Marino High School. And then that gives a vision for our families at Carver and for Valentine, what's expected of them. And so when they come here, well, here's the expectation and here's what you can expect to get at Huntington Middle School. But we know right now that that's going to be definitely different. And one of the things that we've been also able to do that's really been helpful in building program and also helping during this time is sharing staff. And we really have to do that effectively, is sharing the staff members that we have. We have amazing people in this district that teach our kids every day. And how can we share them without stretching them and making sure that they're doing the best that they can every day. And so by sharing them between our school as well as with San Marino High School. And that would also then mean aligning our bell schedule. So our bell schedules would be aligned together. And that's one thing we would definitely have to do. And so that's when you look at this graph, I hope you can see from the factors, impact of program, what the next year would look like, the areas that I've covered, and then you can see the arrows coming out and where those impacts would come. Again, it's not as complex as the high school, and God bless Mr. Kurtenbach and Mr. KC for their work and their efforts, but that's what it would look like for here at Huntington Middle School.
Wow, thank you. I want to open up and just not only say thank you for the presentation, but I loved your video. It was wonderful. So thank you for that welcome video and for introducing the kids as they are transitioning to your school. That was awesome. I'm going to open it up to see if our board members would like to make some comments or if they have any questions. Mrs. Chanlin?
I would just say that I am concerned about those 6th grade classes getting bigger. I know that I mentioned this comment at the last board meeting, and I was assured that the current 5th grade class is smaller than maybe it was a few years ago. But as I recall, my 6th grade daughter had a really hard time with mid to high 30s in her 6th grade classes. And it was one of the it was the reason that she was very anxious to apply and leave to private school. And that is the reality, and that is what we're up against. If we, make 6th grade class sizes bigger, it's just really hard on kids. And I imagine on teachers as well. My other concern is, so I know it said 2.6 for music in secondary. Is that only high school or that's also middle school?
That's sharing between HMS and San Marino High School. And
right.
just to comment back on the 6th grade, that would move us into the high 20s. We're right now in the mid 20s. Average class right now is in the 24s for 6th grade. It would put us right around about 28-1 next year.
Okay. So that's really interesting because I know that my daughter did have like 36 kids in her classes.
For 6th grade?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're still under 30.
Years ago.
Yeah, we're under 30, but I mean, I
great.
hear you. It's definitely a transitional year. And it's definitely, I know that it's one thing that we like to try and hold on to, but unfortunately what our situations with where we're at and some of our harsh realities, those are those harsh realities.
And so with these losses, what does the wheel then look like? What becomes the offerings exactly?
Currently, right now, as of last year, we no longer have the elective wheel because we really wanted to put our kids into the VAPA program as well as into coding. And then that's to grow those programs, and especially which has shown some growth, and especially in the art program as well. So when I say art, I mean in our fine arts and our visual arts.
Mhm.
And so those kids automatically went into those classes. So they did not have the elective wheel this year.
And so what would it look like with these cuts, with these potential cuts?
It would look like those classes in the VAPA program would definitely increase in our numbers.
But they would still all be offered, and they would still, and coding would still be there for students?
Not right now. Coding would not be on the table. Looking at the reduction right now, coding would not be on the table. So this is where we put again our creative heads together. It would increase our numbers in the VAPA areas, most definitely. But then again, it goes back to how are we going to place these kids into the best with the instructional staff that we have here at Huntington.
Coding is one of those positions that is funded by Measure E. That's why you see it on the list.
So it'll no longer be at the middle school
Or at the high school.
Or at the high school.
entirely.
All right. Mr. Barbary, did you have any comments or questions?
And I think not at this time, no.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chang?
Oh, yes. Before I make a comment, I want to take this opportunity to appreciate three co-chair for the Major E campaign, and Mr. Aaron Chen and Mrs.
Jennifer Chuang?
Jennifer Chuang and
Chris Mallett?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that all the community need to understand how hard for three co-chair they are working. Yeah. In this community, we cannot just rely on the several people and make an effort to make all the program to be available. It's very difficult. I think during this time, I think the community people need to have another mentality. See, after this failure, what we can do for the community, for the school, instead of, if every parent just take what my kid can get from after the budget cut, so that will be not do the things for the school district. I think right now we need to realize what the resource we have, and then let the administrator fully to make a decision what we can benefit for entire education quality. For the middle school, because this is in between the elementary education and high school, I think this moment what I'm looking for is for a smooth transition to the high school, and then not sacrifice the basic skill and maintain still have some quality education. I think that's what I wish. Yeah. And besides that, tradition, we have a very solid music program. So I would like, not right now, later to hear how we will consolidate for all the music program from the choir and the orchestra or the strings, music. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chang. And I know you just opened up briefly with some thank yous for our Measure E. I also want to thank the many, many voters who came up and came out and voted and were in support of public education and the support of San Marino Unified School District in terms of producing world-class citizens and an education system we can be very proud of. Along with Ms. Jennifer Chuang, Chris Mallett, and Alan Chen. I also want to give my thanks or a shout out to Mrs. Beth Davis, Ms. Carla Domar, and of course, the many, many community volunteers and students, Stephanie Duncan from PTA affiliates, and many of our community came out listened, invited us into their homes and allowed Dr. Wilson to present. PTA, all of our PTAs supported this. And of course, I feel really good because this parcel tax was all about the children. And while we may have come out short, I still want all of us on behalf of the board to thank the community, because there were 63% of you guys who did believe in what we were doing and how to provide for our students and prepare our students for the next road ahead, or the generation. With that being said, Mrs. Chong is our last board member to kind of speak on this before we move on to, and I apologize, Dr. Lynn and Alana, for keeping you guys in the wings. I know I should have probably let all the presentations go. I just felt that it was important to remember the presentation as we were making the comments, that's all. So my apologies.
That was a good call, Mrs. Ryan.
Okay.
Okay, Mrs. Chan.
So I wanted to express something, you know, as somebody who has a middle schooler right now. One thing that the middle school did this year that actually both my kids ended up experiencing it was rolling the students up with their teachers as we crush the box and start thinking about how we are delivering education. Keeping that in mind and understanding that the core of our children's development is in the relationships that they build. And so I want to share, you know, my kindergartner rolled up with her first grade class and they went to a new teacher. And that was so important for the kids because they were in Zoom after having, you know, 6 months together in person. And the transition they were able to make into Zoom was really good for them. And I think that was a common theme among the first grade classrooms, to have that relationship already built with them so that it was not as overwhelming moving into the next online school year. And on that same note, my 8th grader rolled up with her middle school teachers, 2 of them, for her English teacher and her social studies teacher. And that was an amazing opportunity because I can speak to the fact that my sons had been in HMS 5 years ago and they had different teachers and they had very different experiences. And as middle school is such a crucial point of development in who you are, having that ability to be with somebody in a virtual setting after being with them again for 6 months with the teacher really was an amazing part that allowed the teacher to engage and connect with the students. And that was such a gift because not only were they engaged socially, emotionally, but they were also engaged academically because the teacher knew exactly what the students' strengths were and weaknesses were, and were able to build on them. So I would listen in on some of the classes and I would hear the rapport developed between the teacher and the students. And there was such an easy comfort. And being with middle school kids who really need that social emotional development more than anything else, in my opinion, at that age level was really critical. And so, and then I also saw in the very beginning, they really pushed the kids academically too, because they knew what they could handle. And then when it turned to collaborative or cooperative work, they were able to put the kids together with other kids because they knew exactly what the strengths and weaknesses were, and the kids felt more comfortable with each other as well. So as we're looking at reimagining how we're utilizing our staffing, I think looking at rolling kids up and really deepening their learning and speaking to that model of progression and robustness that we apply towards our arts and our other CTE pathways, really I'm thinking about how we could even apply that to our core learning. I think that could make a huge impact for our middle school kids, especially where they're moving from 6th grade in their core 2 periods with a teacher and then to transition into that 7th and 8th grade. And that would be challenging. That would require work for the teachers to be able to sort of shift every year. But I think in the long run, that could be a really amazing tool that our students would really benefit from. in so many ways. So that was it. Thank you.
Thank you. May I comment on that for a second?
Yes, yes, please do.
I greatly appreciate you bringing up that point, because then you speak to the quality really of the instructional staff that we have here at Huntington. I mean, this staff has been amazing to work with, and they continue to impress me, the work that they do. I mean, this staff has gone through a lot of change here at Huntington. And those of you that have been part of this community for a long time are very aware of the staff that is here and the longevity of the staff. And there's a reason why there's the people that are here have been here for so long, is because they develop those relationships with their kids, but because they enjoy working with middle school students. Middle school students are unique in their own way, but middle school teachers get the extra crown. Because you're dealing not just with the academics. Dr. Wilson knows what I'm talking about. And those of you like me that have taught middle school, you get it. It is a different breed. It is a different animal than, not to disrespect any other. I think I would probably put the category of a kindergarten teacher, but middle school teachers, because you're not just dealing with the academics, you're dealing with the social emotional development. You're dealing with not only that, but then go with a young person who's going through young adolescent changes. Then you're going with parents who used to, raise their child with these type of techniques, now their eyes are being rolled at them, and now being talked back to and looked at and ignored and door slammed, where that really didn't happen sometimes. So you take that and then you put that in a classroom, and you put a teacher in front that's going to instruct them about, the science standards, and you're going to put them with math, or you're going to put them in English, and then you talk about that relational piece. That is huge. And that's something the staff has done, and hence why this school is being recognized as a blue ribbon school. And so that's a piece that we cannot forget. And that goes to this staff. And when I say the staff, I not only mean the instructional staff, I mean the aides that work with these kids in and out of the classroom on an everyday, as well as to the front office staff. So there's amazing people here. And so I appreciate that insight. And that's something Mr. Cash and I will definitely look into as we build our master schedule and that rolling up with the student and the teacher. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and I will add that. It was
Dr.
Ms. Ryan, I
Wilson,
was just
can
going to
say
add
one
that.
last thing?
Oh yeah, of course you can.
Sorry,
you can say
one
as many
last
things
thing.
as you want.
I just want to put a reminder we've had 2 presentations so far with the high school and with the middle school. As we're looking at the numbers, please, 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 look at the data of what we're doing with the numbers and the class size, because we need to ensure the success of all students, as well as how we support our teachers, because sometimes we forget about the why are we doing this? We're doing this for the students, and we need to make sure that each of our students are connected to learning and that it's continual. But it could be easily overlooked when we're crunching numbers, when we're not realizing that we need to provide additional resources for our teachers, for professional development, for things that will make it successful. Because as we crunch programs and we streamline things, what sometimes gets lost is that interpersonal connection, but also when our class sizes grow, and Mrs. Chanlin spoke about this, as well as Ms. Chong, when you're looking at class sizes at 30, 35, we need to really look at what we're doing there, because there's a right way of doing it with the support and the necessary tools, and that's up to you guys to figure out. And so thank you, and I so appreciate all of your thoughts on this, and I'm going to just move us along. Jeff, I know you had other things to say, but I just want to remember.
Actually, I was going to move us along, and I just want to close the secondary situation by saying one big difference this year from last year is that our middle and high school principals and assistant principals, and I want to emphasize this, have been collecting their thoughts together. They've been saying, what do we need to deliver? What are the deliverables for our kids as they move along? And they've been doing that with our elementary principals too, which kind of brings us to this section. So, this morning I gathered the entire team on a Zoom, principals, executive team, and we almost had a cry fest because most of us didn't sleep much last night because we went to bed knowing that the polling was not looking very good. And the reason, as we shared this morning, was twofold. One is we thought first about our teachers and our counselors, that these are real people. These are people that have devoted their lives. They could have made a lot more money in other industries, but they've devoted their lives to connecting with students in very real ways to prepare them for life. And the greatest joy I will ever have in my life was having been a middle school mathematics teacher years ago, and having that daily contact with kids and the impact, not just teaching them algorithms and algebra and geometry, but actually connecting with them in very personal ways and helping them through those transitions in life. So, you know, we should have said that more at the beginning, but this is such a serious process that we're caught up in, and every person, as you've heard so far, has taken this very seriously. And again, I want to thank you for your input. So with that, let me transition to Dr. Michael Lin and Alana Foray, our great elementary principals, to jump in. Dr. Choi, you can return to the presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Superintendent Wilson and members of the governance team. At the elementary level, the two principals work with HR during summer break to determine FTEs, which is full-time equivalents. These are teacher FTEs, which are based on student enrollment numbers. And this is especially the case with kindergarten because kindergarten enrollment is ongoing throughout the summer. For TK to 3, we benefit from an additional grade span adjustment per pupil if we keep the average class enrollment at the school site at or below 24 students. There is no additional state funding for the upper grade levels. And Mrs. Foray, would you like to talk about the numbers at Valentine?
This year at Valentine, we have 26 full-time equivalent positions, TK through 5. And Mike, did you want to?
Yeah, so for Carver, you know, we color-coded our tables in such a way that our TK through 3rd, if you look at those numbers, even though you look at some of the 3rd grade numbers, it's 25, 26, the average has to be below 24 at the school site in order to qualify for the $832 per student grade span adjustment that we get from the state for TK through 3rd. So the average has to be the total number of students, TK through 3rd, divided by the number of teachers. For grades 4 and 5, there is no limit. And so there's no additional funding. So you can see that in the case of Stacy Tromsano, she has 27. Historically, it has hovered around right below 30. I know with possibly the question is, what will happen if we have to make those cuts? Then the class size for grades 4 and 5 will have to go up. Okay, and pretty much that concludes the elementary portion.
Thanks, Mike. Mrs. Ryan?
Thank you, Dr. Lin, and thank you, Alana Foray. Any comments or questions from our board? Mrs. Chen-Lin?
I know that there is one counselor at each of the elementary schools, and I would say that I'm a person who really believes that we have to cut, right? We don't want to cut anywhere, but I just wonder if we can try to keep as many teachers that touch actual students and do everything we can to keep students really engaged. And I get that, you know, people are going to have to take up the slack somewhere. And I just wonder if, you know, those counseling positions are as important as at the elementary schools, as opposed to, I mean, the larger class sizes get and the more disengaged kids get, the more kids we lose over time in general. They lose interest in learning and their joy of learning. And, you know, if parents can leave to private school, they will. So that's
Thank
all
you.
I have to say.
Thank you, Mrs. Chen-Lin. Mr. Chang, please.
Well, for the last 12 months, you know, I want to put high remarks on the both of the two principals. I think Ms. Ford and Dr. Lin, they work together. I think this is the best result, especially right now we have the cut with their collaboration together. I think even we may not save some the FTE, but I think the daily operation sometimes they may miss some the teaching position immediately, so they can back up each other. I feel this also is a plus. Yeah. So I want to appreciate both of them.
Thank you, Mr. Chang and Mrs. Chong.
Hi, so I just wanted to clarify, I pulled up the resolution as it's currently sitting, and we actually are already going to be losing our elementary counselors, correct?
I believe that is part of the current resolution.
Is it one or is it both?
Dr. Deloti, are you there?
I thought originally it was.
Yes, I'm sorry. Could you repeat that?
The question on the board is the reduction of the counselor at the elementary level 1.0 or 2.0?
2.0.
Okay.
And then in addition to that, we're looking at elementary K5 teachers 6, elementary music 1.0. Sorry, I'm reading this because I feel like it wasn't really clear, and I need our community to understand what we're looking at here.
Sure. So paid for by Measure E are 3 elementary teachers at each of the schools.
Okay.
For a total of 6.0. And so that's why you see 6.0 K through 5 or TK through 5. In addition to that, the music teacher at the elementary was brought back by the one-time money from We Are San Marino last year. And the counseling positions, initially we were going to just have 1 counselor shared by each of the elementary schools, but we had to weigh that against a reduction of 3 English teachers at the secondary. And because we feel very fortunate to have been able to afford elementary school counselors at the elementary, but most districts don't have elementary counselors. We really prioritize the English teachers. And it's really hard to go through that exercise, but again, we're doing it in cooperation with the principals and assistant principals and looking at the master schedule and considering the class size impact and all of those things. And so that's where we came up with eliminating the elementary counselor positions at each of the schools in favor of only reducing English by 2.0 as opposed to 3.0 at the secondary.
And then I'm assuming just like we talked about putting training with the teachers to be able to do the ELP, and I assume that counseling will also become part of their professional development to ensure that the actual work won't be lost. Finding time in the schedule, that's another issue.
It is a challenge.
Yeah, but and then we're looking at, okay.
We do have school psychologists at each of the elementary schools as well. So,
and are we looking at those positions?
No.
I think we need those for
Special ed.
specific special ed reasons.
Special education.
And those are not tied to our funding for any of these anyway. So, right? Okay.
Right.
Okay.
That's correct.
All right. Mr. Barbary, was that your comment or did you have other comments to make?
No.
I know you chimed in. Okay.
No. I do appreciate Alana and Mike's hard work. They've done a great job this year. I think keeping, really working together so that it felt like elementary was one voice. I think that wasn't necessarily the case in the past. And it's, this is the sort of stuff I leave to the experts. I hate to see classes grow, class sizes grow, but at some point we get down to the math of it all. I understand that. So, hopefully maybe we do end up with a bunch more students at elementary and we don't have to, or we can bring back some of those some of those teachers, or, you know, it's elementary is so it's straightforward, but it's hard because you never know at kindergarten how many are coming in, and certainly, you know, first grade, some kids join too. And so, you know, those just end up being math at some point. And you know, hopefully we have some growth at the elementary and we can bring some of the teachers back. But, you know, again, it's the tough math that we're doing right now. So I leave it to Mrs. Frey and Dr. Lynn to make those judgments.
Could I just?
All right, with that go ahead. Go ahead, Alana.
I think it's important for the board members to understand that the reductions at the elementary school would impact 4th and 5th grade primarily.
Mm-hmm.
Because we receive additional funding for the primary grades, if our numbers are under the 24 average, and that's not something that we can afford to lose. So if you're doing the math and looking at our rising numbers for next year, we're just under 200 for 4th and 5th grade, and going from 8 teachers to 5 teachers. So we're looking at very large numbers. And then specifically, you've got to look at each grade and how do you divide 5 teachers between 2 grades. So it's going to have a significant impact.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Alana. This question is for Dr. Wilson. Dr. Wilson, when we were talking about funding, we talked about the fact that if the schools were open and we were open prior to the deadline date, there was additional funding or there was more funding coming. Does that number or that money help us at all in this formula?
I would kind of defer it to Mrs. Deloti, but again, it's one-time funding. So the quick answer is not really. In reference to the money, though, I do want to, I pointed this out last meeting, the fact that we did get open for TK through 2, and the fact that Dr. Choi and the compliance team have done a great job on developing a filed COVID safety plan, which we're one of only 12 districts in the county as of the weekend to do that. We are open to getting the full funding. Any district who was not in that position as of April 1st loses 1% of that money per day moving forward. So, you know, we'll definitely engage the board on ways to mitigate the cuts. But in fact, this is the reality. And I think Dr. Delatore's done a great job of showing the why here with regards to these positions being tied specifically to Measure E. So I'll leave it at that. The short answer is no, it doesn't really help us too much because we have to submit that budget for 3 years out to the county.
All right, thank you. This kind of concludes our presentation.
We have
Dr.
one more
Wilson?
little piece here, actually.
One more?
I'm sorry, Dr.
Richter.
I've asked her to keep it brief. I know it looks like a lot, but she's going to just share real briefly with you some of the impacts on instruction and curriculum.
Thank you, Superintendent Dr. Wilson, Board President Ms. Ryan, and members of the board. I feel like everything that I wanted to share tonight has already been shared by everyone on this panel, and that really pleases me because it really reiterates where our priorities are. With our priorities lie with our students, with our teachers, and with the quality of our instructional program. But with that said, I still would like to share just a little bit about the impact of what this means for our instructional program. Measure E not passing will definitely have an impact on our programs and our instruction and what this looks like moving forward, as our site principals and assistant principals have outlined in previous slides. With that said, I also want to reiterate what they have shared and what Dr. Wilson has shared with regards to his direction and commitment to move forward, to continue to operate as a progressive, high-achieving district that we have always been, and to be ready to open our schools, welcome our students, and provide an exceptional instructional program within the funds that are available to us in our given budgets. We know that how we do things is going to look very different from what we've done in the past. However, we are committed to our students, our teachers, our community, and our instructional program, and we'll have already come together to make this work. We want to protect the integrity of our instructional programs and pathways and overall educational experiences for all of our students, TK through 12. Additionally, what this means, as our site administrators have pointed out, is that we're going to need to take a closer look at how we can design and restructure our programs for the purpose of really maintaining and protecting the integrity of our programs, our course offerings, our pathways, and the caliber of instruction. We know that unfortunately there will need to be reductions in certain sections and even certain courses. However, our priority will be that we continue to maintain and strengthen the focus on student needs, student interests, programs, and course interests for our students. At the same time, trying to maintain and increase access to the courses that we offer. And this includes our VAPA courses, excuse me, our CTE courses, our AP courses, dual enrollment courses, and so forth, so that we can continue to attract students, recruit students, and most importantly, retain our students and families. We know that more than ever, this is a critical time as we experience a significant decline in enrollment statewide. So this is critical to our success as a school district. We also need to take into consideration current and future budgetary and staffing constraints as we restructure and redesign our course offerings and our overall instructional program district-wide, elementary, middle, and high school. As our principals shared, this will result in larger class sizes, possibly combining classes, narrower scope of offerings to really target student interests, reshifting, rescheduling certain classes, sharing of certain staff, looking closely at really the robust courses, the courses that students are interested in, the pathways that are more robust and that generate the most interest, so that we can continue to focus on developing intentional pathways and programs across all sites from elementary to high school. We may no longer be able to offer various courses for students to select from. However, we will maintain a strong focus to continue to focus on those core courses that are required for graduation. We'll be able to do this effectively. To be able to do this effectively, we will need to look closely at how we can best align our given resources or our available resources, looking closely at school schedules, available resources, and the ways in which we can support our teachers. And this goes back to a comment that was made earlier about supporting our teachers through professional development. We know there are going to be changes, and to be able to best have those changes be effective, we do need to provide professional development year-round for our teachers. We know this work can be done. We simply have to be intentional and methodical given the available resources we have. Although we're not going to be able to do things the way we have in the past, it's going to be imperative that we continue to maintain a strong focus on communication so that we can strategically align, consolidate, and combine resources to be able to maintain our exceptional instructional programs. As you heard from our principals, over this past year, our site leadership have done an amazing job at increasing not only the vertical articulation between the high school and the middle school, but also horizontal. Alana and Mike have worked tirelessly throughout the year to increase communication and make sure that they're moving forward as an elementary group. So, and that also goes to Daryl, the work that Daryl's doing with Jason at the high school, so that we can move forward as a district to really maximize the articulation and the resources, and to provide intentional vertical pathways for our students. It's going to be very important moving forward, especially as we're looking at realigning resources, sharing staff, and possibly combining certain courses and certain programs. We know that the board has expressed a strong interest in expanding dual enrollment programs, CTE pathways, AP courses, and this is something that the district is definitely going to continue to work on and support our school administrators to prioritize the work through potential partnerships and internships for our students. However, we will need to do the work within our means, given that Measure E has not passed, and to make this happen as effectively as possible. And then lastly, I would just like to share and reiterate Dr. Wilson's vision for the development of a strategic plan. This will serve instrumental in identifying, defining, and aligning our district and community values, our priorities, and our budgets, and allow us to prioritize our purpose and continue to provide and build exceptional educational programs for our students, as well as serve as the right opportunity to really think outside of the box. And I want to say smash the box too and reinvent the wheel with regards to what San Marino Unified School District programs can look like in the future. And I know that we are all excited as a team to get this process started. So we are looking forward to that. Was that short and sweet, Dr. Wilson?
Thank you, Dr. Richter.
Absolutely.
And thank you, board, for all your great comments tonight. You know, I had prepared to use a couple of quotes about less is more and all that kind of stuff, and it just hit me as so disingenuous in this moment because, you know, in the end, you know, we can talk about smashing boxes and all that stuff and reinventing, but we're really talking about people right now, and people that we care about, people that we love, people that are our family. You know, I've had the opportunity to be in every classroom this year, and you know, I've been in 3 districts. I've never seen a comprehensive quality of teacher like I've seen here in San Marino across the board. Just amazing educators who love their kids and who invest themselves every single day in what they do, and they're trying so hard. I mean, I've watched the struggles of, I've mentioned several times, my wife as a teacher, and to see how they have to reach kids. But these folks have done just amazing work, and to see where the counseling program's gone in this last year, just fantastic. Fantastic hires by, you know, Jason and Daryl and Linda's office. So these are people in the end, and it's really, really sad. And unfortunately, I picked up on a couple of email threads from individuals who were vocally against passing Measure E and how they're in celebratory mode right now. And I think the thought I need to leave you with is that this is a pivot point, good, bad, or indifferent, in San Marino Unified School District. And I would challenge us as a community to get up off of the ground here and dust ourselves off. And we got to figure this out together. And that's when we talk about strategic planning. I am looking forward to engaging this entire community and understanding where people are coming from, because I believe once we begin to understand what is driving some of this, I'll just say, negative energy that's brought us to this point, we can begin to address it together as a community. But that's going to require that we all gather together in one accord and pull together, moving off into the future. And so tonight, I consider it the launching of a strategic plan process that's going to incorporate stakeholders around the district. It's going to listen to students. Vahini, thank you for being a representative of the students. But, you know, I know Dr. Richter's been working with you to begin reaching out beyond just the high school. And so this is, as hard as this is an opportunity to begin a new chapter. And so with that, Mrs. Ryan, I'll turn it back over to you, and you can end it however you want. If you want to call back on all the board members, but go ahead, Mrs. Ryan.
Mrs. Chong has her hand raised.
Oh, great. Sure.
I'm listening to all this tonight, and it's a little sad because it's reminiscent of what we felt last year. And I was sitting on the other side as a parent a year ago. And so I think I have to say something that is not going to sound like a board member. It's going to sound like a parent. And this is what the district is going to look like if we accept this defeat of Measure E now. So Mrs. Chan Lin talked about, are we going to push ourselves to try to be on a June ballot? I don't know if that timeline is feasible. I don't know that timeline is helpful, honestly. I'm not sure. I know that that's what a lot of parents are thinking. I know that that's even what some people were thinking who voted no. I actually got an email from someone that said, hey, look, do it again, but take these things out. And so I think we have to have at least a conversation around that, to give our parents that chance to tell us if that's what they want, first of all. Now is the time for everybody in this community to voice themselves and what they want of our schools. Maybe we asked too much of the community. You know, there's some humility here. in this, that maybe we just asked for too much right now. I've been breaking down all day. What did we do wrong? What did we get wrong? And maybe we didn't get anything wrong, but we cannot deny the reality that the toll COVID has had on us all, and the defeatism that we're experiencing in our lives on so many levels. And I don't want COVID to win. And I feel like if we let this go on, that we're saying COVID is beating San Marino schools. And we have not done that. We reopened our schools. We rallied and beat the odds of what was possible. And I don't want us to feel like we are going to simply accept defeat now if there is a possibility of fighting back on defeat. Not fighting within the community, right. But fighting against defeat, because I don't know if it's possible, but I do think it's something we need to think about. And everyone in the community really has to have a real heart-to-heart about these issues and our values. So put my board hat back on now. That was me as a parent talking, and as a board member. Obviously, I'm both, and that's why I'm here. So, thank you.
Well, thank you. Those are wonderful thoughts. We have to turn a corner together. I can't emphasize that enough. Is that we have to begin to set back those things that have held us back. And Linda, you're on the line here. We've reached out to the county registrar's office to try to get some clarification on June. Unfortunately, there was a death in the family of somebody very key there that would have a lot of that information. And so Linda's been waiting to hear back. Linda, have you received any additional information?
No, I expect to hear back from the assistant director. Her name is Letitia. She's going to, I'm sure, call me by noon tomorrow to let me know what those deadlines are. But I did reach out to our campaign consultant, Tramatola, who did inform me that he thinks that the resolution would need to be reviewed and approved by the board over the course of 2 meetings. So I did get that information in terms of timing.
So what we're looking at is a very tight timeline, if it's at all possible. Most did not think that we would have a decisive win or a loss by now. It just didn't seem possible. And so here we are. And so I think that as far as the options go for the Board of Education, I mean, one thing that we could do is we could set a meeting 24 hours out, right? And we have to provide 24-hour notice and regather this time tomorrow and see if there's additional guidance. And in the meantime, I don't know, Linda, jump in here. I'm just kind of fishing here. In the meantime, prepare a new resolution based on the old resolution, but with the redactions that you've mentioned. And then that would be the review. And then 24 hours later would have to be the adoption. And if that fits within the county timeline, that's really, I mean, we are literally at the last possible moment here with that. So any thoughts on that? Yes, Ms. Chanlin.
I think that's really important that we do, look hard at that and try to get that done. But I also think that in order for the community to support this in June, they need to see, which doesn't give us much time. I mean, we are all, we're really under the gun here with getting this on the June ballot, but also getting the goals and the strategic planning and communicating well to the community. I think that is part of the problem leading up to this. So, between now and mid-May, when the community votes on this again, they need to see what we're doing. They need to see progress. They need to see strategic planning getting done, and they need to know what we're doing.
Okay. Any other comments?
Ms. Caramella, did you have any final thoughts?
I think Mr. Barber was about to jump in there, Mrs.
Oh,
Ryan.
I'm sorry.
Sorry. We'll have Bahini will bring the most wisdom at the end, so we'll listen to her.
I just want to echo that I think there was some some very specific things that if we address them in the next resolution, the numbers are quite, even though it's percentage wise, it looks like a couple of points. It's, I think it's 130 votes or something. From the people I've spoken to that did, say to me that they were voting no, I think, by addressing the length of the tax alone will bring back a significant number of voters. Obviously, we got to go through all the work again. We need to educate the community. Obviously, this conversation will be in their minds, or at least in the public to discuss about what the actual impact of this not being renewed would be. So I also want to echo, let's see what we can do, and let's push towards getting a resolution if possible, or get something on the ballot if possible.
Anybody else? So Mrs. Deloti, I hate to put you on the spot here, but I think you're as close to the resident expert as we can on this. One suggestion would be that it is 7:20 p.m. I would be interested what constitutes an official notice of 24 hours for a meeting. First of all, what would that step need to look like? And then I would suggest that we notice 2 meetings in a row, one for the evening and one for the daytime of the 5th, if we're actually proposing going this direction.
Okay, I really feel it's important to make sure that we are consulting with council on this in order to ensure that we're not making any mistakes or missteps in the process, which would discount what we're doing. So I will reach out to council with those questions and get back to you right away as soon as possible. I'm not even sure that it's okay, and it could be, I'm not positive that it's okay to do this in a special meeting.
Right. Well, I know that it's not recommended to do it in a special meeting. I don't know, but again, you're right. That's going to have to rely on what council says.
Yeah, so let me vet that out with council, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible, and I'll let them know that we need this information stacked.
And before we get to Vahini here, is Mrs. Ryan, Mr. Chang, any board member, any cautionary tales here, any thoughts on things that we should be thinking about or questions that we should be asking?
I don't know if I made my point clear. I think it's also really important that this next measure not be forever, but just to have limits.
just to put your mind at rest, Mrs. Chandler, in my conversation with Mr. Tramatola earlier today, I said, in no way, shape, or form will any future resolution, have that perpetuity piece attached to it, as long as I'm here. So thank you. I think your point is clear.
Can I also say that if we're not looking at being able to be successful with this, to really push our community to consider hard if there are other alternatives to consider. I know we can't do one-time fundraising, but if we're going to be reevaluating bringing any of these positions back, if that's going to be possible or not. I know fundraising is very difficult this year, very difficult. And so I don't know if that's possible or not, but to put that to the community, we're not doing the work here by ourselves, guys.
Yeah.
This is on the community. So that's all.
It's a great thought. Thank you. Okay, Vahini.
So I am really hopeful that something gets put on the ballot in June again, but I just think for something to pass in the future, there does need to be more clarity with a new resolution, because I think that was a big problem this time, as Mr. Barber said earlier.
Great, thank you.
All right, so with that, I'm going to leave you with one thought, that it is through our positive actions combined with our positive thinking that will result in our success. So I'm going to leave you guys with that. And if there are no other comments, what time is it? The board is
7:23.
At 7:23, the board meeting is adjourned.